October 13th, 1989 was a Friday, and the small town of Hollow Creek, nestled in the fog-draped hills of upstate New York, was alive with the nervous energy that only a Friday the 13th could summon. The harvest moon hung low, swollen and orange, casting an eerie glow over the cornfields that bordered the town. Locals whispered about the date, their voices tinged with unease, as if the alignment of the calendar and the lunar cycle was an invitation for something sinister to creep into their lives. For most, it was superstition, a reason to lock doors early or avoid the shadowed backroads. For others, like Clara Hensley, it was just another night to survive. Clara was 32, a single mother with tired eyes and a spine forged from years of scraping by. She worked the night shift at the Hollow Creek Diner, a greasy spoon on the edge of Route 17, where truckers and drifters swapped stories over burnt coffee and pie. Her daughter, Lily, was 9, a quiet girl with a knack for drawing and a habit of asking questions Clara couldn't always answer. They lived in a sagging rental house on Maple Street, its peeling paint and creaking floors a testament to their precarious existence. Clara wasn't superstitious, but she felt the weight of the town's collective unease as she tied her apron that evening, her fingers fumbling with the knot. The diner's neon sign buzzed outside, flickering like a dying star. The night started quietly enough. The usual crowd trickled in. Old man Carver, who nursed a coffee and muttered about the weather. Jenny Tate, a nurse fresh off her shift at the county hospital. And a couple of long-haul truckers whose names Clara never bothered to learn. But around 9 p.m., a stranger walked in. He was tall, with a lean frame that seemed to carry the weight of too many miles. His denim jacket was frayed at the cuffs, and his boots were caked with mud that left faint tracks on the linoleum. He sat at the counter, his grey eyes scanning the room, before settling on Clara with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Coffee, black?" he said, his voice low, like gravel shifting underfoot. Clara poured it without a word, her instincts telling her to keep her distance. There was something about him. Maybe the way his fingers twitched slightly, or the way his gaze lingered too long on the door, that set her on edge. She chalked it up to the night, the date, the moon. Anything to keep her mind from wandering to darker places. By 10:30, the diner was nearly empty. Jenny had left, and Carver was dozing in his booth. The stranger, who'd introduced himself as Eli, was still there, nursing his third cup of coffee and scribbling something on a napkin. Clara was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door jingled and 2 more men stepped inside. They were locals, Tommy Burke and his cousin Ray, both in their late 20s, both known for trouble. Tommy had a scar above his left eyebrow from a bar fight the previous summer, and Ray's grin was all teeth, like a dog baring its fangs. They were loud, their voices cutting through the diner's quiet hum, and Clara's stomach tightened. She knew their type, men who thrived on chaos, who saw a place like Hollow Creek as their playground. "Clara, darling," Tommy drawled, sliding into a booth. "Get us a couple beers, will ya?" "We don't serve alcohol, Tommy," she said, her voice steady despite the pulse hammering in her throat. "You know that." Ray laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Come on, it's Friday the 13th. Live a little." Eli's head lifted slightly, his eyes flicking toward the booth. Clara noticed, and so did Tommy. The air shifted, heavy with unspoken tension. She busied herself behind the counter, hoping the night would pass without incident. But Hollow Creek had a way of turning hopes to ash. At 11:15, the lights flickered, Not unusual for the diner, with its ancient wiring, but it sent a ripple of unease through the room. Carver stirred, mumbling something about a storm. Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows and sending leaves skittering across the parking lot. Clara glanced at the clock. 2 hours until her shift ended. 2 hours until she could go home to Lily, who was staying with Mrs. Pollard, the elderly neighbor who smelled of lavender and kept a shotgun by her rocking chair. The trouble started just before midnight. Tommy and Ray were getting louder, their laughter edged with menace. They'd ordered burgers, but Tommy kept tossing fries at Ray, who swatted them away with exaggerated swings. Eli watched them, his expression unreadable, his napkin now covered in dense, erratic scribbles. Clara was about to tell them to settle down when Tommy stood, swaying slightly, and sauntered over to the counter. "You ever think about leaving this dump, Clara?" he asked, leaning too close. His breath smelled of whiskey, confirming her suspicion that they'd been drinking before they arrived. "You and that kid of yours deserve better than this. Now back off, Tommy," she said, her voice low but firm. She gripped the rag in her hand, her knuckles whitening. Tommy grinned, undeterred. "Just making conversation. Ain't that right, Ray?" Ray joined him at the counter, his grin wider now. "Sure is. Just being friendly." Eli's pen stopped moving. He folded the napkin and slipped it into his pocket, his movements deliberate. Clara's heart sank. She'd seen this before. Men posturing, circling each other like wolves. She was about to call for Carver to wake up, to have some semblance of a witness, when the door burst open. It was Sheriff Dan Hargrove, his uniform rumpled and his face lined with exhaustion. Hargrove was a good man, but he was stretched thin, the only law in a town too small for its own troubles. He scanned the room, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Tommy and Ray. "Evening, boys," he said, his tone deceptively calm. "Heard you were causing a stir at the bar earlier. Thought I'd check in." Tommy's grin faltered, but Ray laughed. "Just having fun, Sheriff. No harm done." Hargrove's gaze flicked to Eli, then back to Clara. "Everything all right here?" She nodded, but her throat was tight. "Just fine, Dan." The sheriff lingered for a moment, his hand resting on the holster at his hip. Then he tipped his hat and left, the bell jingling in his wake. Clara exhaled, but the relief was short-lived. Tommy's eyes were on Eli now, and there was something dangerous in them. "You got a problem, stranger?" Tommy asked, his voice low. Eli didn't answer. He stood, dropped a crumpled bill on the counter, and walked out without a word. The door swung shut behind him, and the diner felt smaller, the air thicker. Clara's hands shook as she cleared his cup, the napkin he'd been scribbling on forgotten in her haste. By 1 a.m., Tommy and Ray were gone, their laughter echoing in the parking lot as they peeled out in Tommy's rusted pickup. Carver had shuffled off, muttering about the moon. Clara was alone, the diner silent except for the hum of the fridge and the distant howl of the wind. She locked up, her fingers clumsy with fatigue, and started the short walk home. The harvest moon watched her, its light cutting through the fog like a blade. Maple Street was quiet, the houses dark. Clara's boots crunched on the gravel, the sound sharpened the stillness. She was halfway home when she heard it, a low, rhythmic thumping, like footsteps trailing her. She stopped, her breath catching, but the sound stopped too. She told herself it was nothing, just the night playing tricks. But when she reached her house, the front door was ajar. Her heart lurched. Mrs. Pollard was supposed to be with Lily, and the old woman was meticulous about locking up. Clara pushed the door open, her voice barely a whisper. "Mrs. Pollard? Lily?" The living room was dark, the only light coming from the moon spilling through the windows. Mrs. Pollard was slumped in the armchair, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her eyes wide and unseeing. A thin line of blood trickled from her temple. Clara's scream caught in her throat as she stumbled forward, her eyes darting to the hallway. Lily's room. She ran, her pulse roaring in her ears. The door to Lily's room was open, the bed empty. Her daughter's drawings were scattered across the floor, their bright colors mocking the darkness. Clara's knees buckled, and she clutched the doorframe, a sob tearing from her chest. That's when she saw it. A napkin, folded neatly on Lily's pillow, covered in the same erratic scribbles she'd seen Eli making at the diner. Panic clawed at her. She grabbed the napkin, her hands trembling as she unfolded it. The scribbles weren't random. They were a map, crude but unmistakable, marking a path through the cornfields to an abandoned barn on the edge of town. Clara's mind raced. Eli, the stranger with the grey eyes and the twitchy fingers. She should call Hargrove, wait for help. But every second felt like a lifetime. And Lily was out there, somewhere, with him. Clara grabbed Mrs. Pollard's shotgun from its place by the rocking chair and ran into the night. The cornfields loomed ahead, their stalks swaying like whispers in the wind. The moon lit her path, but it also cast long, jagged shadows that seemed to move with her. The barn was a mile away, its silhouette a dark wound against the horizon. Clara's breath burned in her lungs as she pushed through the corn, the stalks snagging at her clothes like greedy hands. The barn was ancient, its wood warped and grey, its doors hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Clara slowed, her grip tightening on the shotgun. She could hear something inside, a low, rhythmic hum, like a chant. She crept closer, her boots silent on the damp earth. Through a gap in the boards, she saw him. Eli stood in the center of the barn, surrounded by flickering candles. Lily was there, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Tommy and Ray were with him, their faces lit by the candlelight, their expressions strange, almost reverent. On the floor was a circle of symbols, drawn in what looked like ash, their shapes twisting in ways that hurt Clara's eyes to look at. "You're early," Eli said, without turning, his voice calm, almost amused. "I wasn't expecting you until the moon was higher." Clara raised the shotgun, her hand steady, despite the fear clawing at her insides. "Let her go, Eli. Now." He turned, his grey eyes glinting in the candlelight. "You don't understand, Clara. This isn't about you, or her. It's about the harvest. The moon demands a price." Tommy stepped forward, his scar catching the light. "He's right, Clara. You should have stayed out of it." Ray laughed, that same barking sound, but there was no humor in it now. "It's tradition. Been this way for centuries. Hollow Creek's got a debt to pay." Clara's mind reeled. Tradition? A debt? She thought of the town's whispers, the stories of missing children, of strange lights in the cornfields on moonlit nights. She'd dismissed them as folklore, the kind of tales small towns spun to scare themselves. But now, with her daughter trembling in the shadows, it felt all too real. "Let her go," Clara said again, her voice breaking. "Or I swear I'll kill you all." Eli smiled, a slow, cold thing. "You can try, but the moon's watching. It always gets what it wants." Before Clara could react, Tommy lunged. She fired, the shotgun's roar deafening in the confined space. Tommy staggered, clutching his shoulder, but Ray was on her, knocking the gun from her hands. She fought, her nails raking his face, but he was stronger, pinning her to the ground. Eli stepped forward, a knife glinting in his hand, its blade etched with the same symbols as the floor. "This is bigger than you," he said, kneeling beside her. "The town thrives because we pay the price. One life every decade under the harvest moon. It's kept Hollow Creek safe." Clara's eyes darted to Lily, who was struggling against her bonds. She thought of Mrs. Pollard, of the blood on her temple, of the empty bed. Rage surged through her, hotter than fear. She drove her knee into Ray's groin, and he doubled over, gasping. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing a candle and hurling it at Eli. The flame caught his sleeve, and he cursed, dropping the knife. The barn erupted into chaos. Tommy was shouting, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Ray was on his knees, wheezing. Eli was batting at the flames on his arm, his calm facade cracking. Clara dove for the knife, her fingers closing around its hilt just as Eli lunged for her. She swung, the blade catching him across the chest. He stumbled back, blood blooming dark against his shirt. "Lily, run!" Clara screamed, cutting through her daughter's bonds. Lily scrambled to her feet, tears streaming down her face, and bolted for the door. Clara followed, but Ray grabbed her ankle, yanking her back. She kicked, her heel connecting with his jaw, and he fell, dazed. Outside, the moon was brighter now, its light searing. Clara and Lily ran, the cornfields swallowing them as the barn burned behind them. The flames licked at the sky, the smoke curling like a warning. Clara clutched Lily's hand, her heart pounding, and didn't stop until they reached the road. Sheriff Hargrove found them an hour later, shivering and covered in ash. Clara told him everything, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. The barn was still smoldering when he arrived, but there was no sign of Eli, Tommy, or Ray. The symbols on the floor were gone, burned away, or never there at all. Hargrove called it a miracle that Clara and Lily had escaped, but his eyes lingered on the cornfields, as if he knew something he wasn't saying. The town tried to move on. The diner reopened, and Clara went back to work, her hands steadier now, but her eyes haunted. Lily stopped drawing, her pencils untouched, her silence louder than words. The harvest moon faded, and Hollow Creek settled back into its quiet rhythm. But the whispers never stopped. Stories of the barn, of the stranger, of the night the moon demanded a price. Years later, Clara found the napkin in a box of Lily's things. Its scribbles faded, but still legible. It wasn't a map, not really. Just a list of names, dozens of them, stretching back decades. At the bottom was Lily's name, written in fresh ink, as if it had been added that night. Clara burned it, the flames eating the paper until nothing remained but ash. But every October, when the moon hung low and full, Clara locked her doors and kept the shotgun close. She didn't believe in curses, not really. But she knew one thing for certain. Hollow Creek was no stranger to shadows, and some debts were never fully paid.